guys are amazing. Right on. Okay. Thank you. Spasiba. All right. Welcome back. Hi, everybody. How are you enjoying the show? Best show ever? Or best show ever? The last one, right? Of course. It's very different. Well, let me see. What am I forgetting? So, I'm here. You're here. This is good. My name is Josh Long. Thank you for coming to my talk. I appreciate that you have many good alternatives, many good ones. So, it's very kind and very cool that you could come here. I'm going to be covering a lot of code today. It's kind of what I do. So if you want to see the code, it's online. It's on the GitHub. So there's that. Grab that URL. I'm also on Twitter. How many of you are on Twitter? It's 2015. 2015. So who's on Twitter? Twitter? Oh, guys. Do you have email? Who has email? Okay, well, I'm on both of those. Twitter and email. So right on, go email. It's going to be big. I would love, if you have questions or comments or feedback or ideas or, sad notes or great notes, send me them at, on Twitter or an email. That would be great. A little bit about me. I am the Spring Developer Advocate at Pivotal. I am the author now of 5 different books on Spring and enterprise computing. I'm an open source contributor to different projects like Spring Boot and Spring Integration and so on, and Spring Cloud. I'm also a recent Java champion and just very glad to be here. I'm also there's video training out there. If you're on Safari, the O'Reilly Safari Marketplace, there's training there that you might check out that you might like. And I work for a small company called Pivotal. How many of you have heard of Pivotal? Okay, good. So before I forget, we must take care of one important thing. I forgot about that. Now, this is important because I always forget. So when I say, on the count of 3, okay, everybody say borscht, okay, ready? Okay, 1, 2, borscht. Oh, that's so good. It's so good. 1, 2, borscht. Ah, thank you. So money. So, right on. So I work for Pivotal, and we're a small company. We care about helping customers build applications quickly and safely and helping them move that code, those applications, into production. If you're writing software, but no one is using it, does anybody care? It's not really software. It's just fun, and that's not useful, right? So we found that there's a lot of things that people care about when they're trying to deploy applications into production, a lot of things that slow them down that have almost nothing to do with the actual application itself, right? How quickly can you make an application production ready? So as part of that realization, we looked at Spring and this very rich toolbox of things that we have in Spring and said, what can we do to make it easier to build applications based on Spring that support the best practices for building sort of cloud-centric applications, for building applications for modern workloads today, right? It's 2015. We started this journey in 2012, but very much the same rules apply, right? So that's what we're going to talk about is the first part of that, which is Spring Boot, okay? As you no doubt know, building applications is pretty hard, right? It's gotten more complicated over time. Things have changed. We've added more moving parts, and it can be very, very, very difficult. And then once you've built the application, there's a long way to go before you can get it into production. So our answer to that, as I say, is it is Spring Boot. So let's see. We're going to build a brand new Spring Boot application from scratch, and there are many different ways that you can do this yourself as well, right? You can use Groovy, right? How many of you are using Groovy? Groovy, okay. So Groovy, I love Groovy, right? Groovy has a lot of great benefits. If I go to the command line here, for example, okay, desktop, make dir old, open, move misc old, move rest old. Okay, so I'm going to say touch hi.groovy, and I'm going to open up this little Groovy script in my editor, and I'm going to create a simple REST controller using the Spring Boot CLI. Okay, so this is one way to get started with Spring Boot. So I'll say at REST controller, class, greetings, REST controller. Okay, and I'll say def hi at path variable. Oh, and I'll say that I want to respond to requests. Whenever somebody makes a request, an HTTP request, at /hi/name, I want that parameter to be passed into my, my controller handler here. I'll say greeting, hello, name, okay, like that. And that's a very simple REST controller. You can tell because it says REST controller, right? That's how you know it's a REST controller. And then you can use the Spring Boot CLI. And if you have Homebrew or GVM, the Groovy Version Manager, you can install it. It's also just a Java jar, so you can install it, add it to your path. And you can say spring run hi.groovy, right? And what that's going to do is it's going to look at the code in the script, and it's going to see that I have, for example, at REST controller, and it's going to transitively import the type that you need to be able to make this code run. And that means I can go to localhost, some sort of port here, 8080, yeah. Localhost 8080 /hi/Joker conf. And you get this simple REST endpoint, right? Very, very simple. Simple, it works, it's up and running. This has, I think it's a good demo. I think it's a good demo. But of course, you're probably saying, that's no fair, Josh. I can't use that. I can't go into production with that. That's insane. I don't have the Spring CLI in production. And that's fair. So we do have this. You can say spring jar, hi.jar, hi.groovy. And then that'll give you a little jar. And you can just do this. You can say java-jar, hi.jar, right? And that's very simple to manage and to run. So simple that I could email this jar to my grandpa, and my grandpa could run it, right? He could. He has applets. He can run this. If your operations team can't run this, you can fire them. It's okay. It's okay. No, it's the law. It's the law. I checked. It's the law. You can fire them if they cannot run Java-jar. I checked. Now, it's very, very simple, right? That's the point. We're trying to get working services up and running. Of course, you may be saying that this is completely ridiculous. Why would I want to use something so verbose? How am I going to tweet this? How can I tweet this, right? A modern enterprise service should be tweetable, and I agree. So I'm going to take that, and I'll open up Twitter, which is an important metric to there. I can tweet it. That's a REST API that I can tweet. Can you tweet your REST APIs? I'm just asking. I know you can. I'm just kidding. No, but really, that's very, very succinct, and you're not wasting a lot of time expressing things that don't need to be expressed. You're not deploying to WebSphere, right? This is very, very simple. So that's certainly one way to go. And there are others, of course. I'm using Groovy. Maybe you don't want to use Groovy. This is, after all, a Java conference, not particularly a Groovy conference. So I'll go ahead and do Java. I'm going to remove my little highs here. There we go. Okay, back to where we started. Close that out. Close this. And I'm going to go back to start.spring.io. Okay, this is my favorite place on the web after production. So again, if you have a brochure and you can go to production or go to start.spring.io, well, it's a tough choice. Sometimes I go to start.spring.io in order to get to production. So does that count? I think it does. So start.spring.io, if you have a choice, if you can bookmark one place on the internet, start.spring.io. If you have children and they're not able to sleep and you want to read them a story, start.spring.io. If you want to feel better, keep this under your pillow. Start.spring.io. If you want inspiration for a new day after your cup of coffee, or even before your cup of coffee, when you want your Java, go to start.spring.io. Now, it's my favorite place on the web, like I said, after production. It is a simple generator that you can use to get started. You don't need this. This is not actually required, but it is nice. And here, you can design your basic application. So I'm going to create a Maven or Gradle project. How many of you are using Maven? How many of you are using Gradle? Oh, this is where I get worried because there's a delta there. Okay. How many of you are using Ant? Okay, well, I give away hugs free open source hugs for you, okay? So please, I'm here for you. Now, either way, choose one, it's fine. I'm going to choose the latest, greatest version of Spring Boot. That's 1.30. I'm going to specify a group ID, an artifact. That's all fine. I'll call this, I'll give it a package. And I'll specify the kind of build, the kind of artifact that I want to build, right? I can specify a jar or a war. You have choice, right? If you are, by some accident, stuck in the distant past, 10, 15 years ago, unable to travel to the future, which is just today, actually. It's not really the future. It's just right now. If you cannot make it to today, and you're stuck in the past, in the distant past, choose war. But if you're here today with me in this room, then choose jar, okay? Because it's 2015 and we deserve better. This is part of our personal, we love this philosophy. We have a philosophy of make jar, not war, okay? I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. Now, again, you can do what you want, but we're trying to move this thing forward, friends. You have choices. We can support Java 1.6 or 1.7, but I would recommend Java 1.8. Why? Because it's awesome. Also, because these two, except for security updates, are end of life. Right? So 1.8 is really the only sane choice to make today. And then, of course, you have Java and Groovy, right? So that's fine. I'm going to build an application, and I'm going to add different dependencies, different things I want to add. I can do it down here. There's a shopping. I can go shopping. I can say I want to build, certain types of applications with certain technology support, and there's a lot of them, right? A lot, and that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and just search. So first of all, of course, I'm going to build a web application. Great. I'll use the REST repository support. That's fine. I'm going to use Vaadin because I'm going to build everything. I'm not trying to build one app today. I'm just trying to build everything to show you how this works. I'm going to use JPA because I make bad life decisions. Bad life decisions. Now, okay, so there's that. There's that. Yeah. I'm going to bring in the actuator for production readiness. I'll bring in the HAL browser. Okay. What else do I want? Oh, I want timely for some sort of server-side generated template. That'll be fine. I suppose that will be enough for now. Do we want anything else? Tool, sleuth. Oh my goodness, look at all this stuff. Oh, H2. Yep, there we are. Keep that. Embedded database. Gotta have that. I'm going to add the remote shell. Good. So if you go back up here, you'll see those have been added to our selection. Okay, good. So now, let's hit generate. Here we are. And I've got a little zip file. And I'm going to open this zip file in my IDE. And again, you have choices. We don't care what you use. This is just a regular Maven build. It'll work in Eclipse, of course. It'll work in IntelliJ. It'll even work in NetBeans. Now, whenever I give a talk about this, every single time, every country I go to, and I go to a lot of countries, friends, a lot of countries. Every time I go somewhere, the one guy using NetBeans is there. Every time. I like, who's using NetBeans? Like, me! I'm like, oh, come on. How did you find me? How? How can you be that fast? Are you here? Are you here, my friend? Yeah, there he is. I love it. Oh, well, you're very dedicated, you. I appreciate it. No, but I kid, because I love it. NetBeans works just fine. It works great, right? So this is just Java, and the only XML that we have is this Maven build. So, it's just Java, really. I'm going to make the font much bigger. Tell me if this is okay. So I have a couple of profiles. Bigger. Can you see that? Or what about more bigger? Okay, apply. That, yeah. Okay, good stuff. Good. Okay, so I've got a very basic Maven build. And, normal stuff. I can delete this, don't need that. It's got a parent POM. Okay, and the parent POM is optional, but it's very convenient because in the parent POM, we do all the sort of hard work of level setting the version ranges. So if you go to this And then you go up, Spring Boot dependencies. You can see we've nailed down the versions for common libraries. You don't have to use these versions, of course, but it means that if you're trying to use AspectJ or Bitronics or BeanUtils or Mungo or FreeMarker or Velocity or whatever, all of these versions are pinned down, right? We have people on the Spring team who have no hair. None. They're bald as they can be because they have managed this all for you. So you don't have to, okay? It's good. It's a feature. Baldness. Now, our dependencies here are provided for us, right? We've just imported these all. I'm going to go ahead and comment out a few things, and we're going to start with basics. Okay, so I've got my H2 database. I've got testing support. Notice that I didn't get to choose testing. I never had to add that checkbox. It's implied. Of course, you write unit tests, right? Oh, guys. Okay, well, so let's assume yes. I'm going to build a simple application that uses JPA, so we'll start with that, okay? I'll start with this. And it's going to talk to a database, H2. Great, there we are. And other than that, this is pretty simple. I've got a source main, same old, source main Java com example, demo application, a resources directory with a static folder and a templates folder, empty, application.properties, it's empty, a test package with an empty unit test. Otherwise, basic, not very important stuff, right? This is a Spring Boot application. You can tell because it says Spring Boot application. That's how you can tell. And Spring Boot application is actually a meta annotation. It has component scan, so it means that every component in this package or below will be discovered automatically. And it's a configuration class, which means that beans that are defined in this class, bean definitions, I'll show you that in a second, will automatically be registered. And then there's this. This is unique to Spring Boot, okay? This Spring Boot application annotation is very important. But I just want to tell you guys, and girls, of course, that I don't think it's a good name, okay? I'm just going to say it. I'm just saying it. I think that they could have done a better job with the name. I think it should have been, I want to go home early, right? But nobody listens to me on the Spring team, okay? Nobody. And I just think that's a better name. What do you think? Yes? Okay, maybe not. Fine. So we'll leave that out. So now I'm going to build a simple application, and we're not trying to focus on one thing. We're going to look at a lot of things, a lot. I don't expect you to remember everything. I just want you to see that it's very easy to build services, to build apps using this technology. So we're going to go very quickly today, okay? So I'll build a simple entity called reservation, right? And this reservation is just going to store objects into the database. It's going to be an ORM object, a JPA ORM entity. And it's going to have an ID like this, and it's going to have a field that is called reservation name. And now a reservation is sort of like if you call the restaurant and you say, oh, I will be there at 8 o'clock, and there's 2 of us, that's a reservation, right? So it's just a simple domain name. I'm going to have a primary key, so I'll say @ID, and I'll say @generated_value. Good. Okay, IntelliJ, what's wrong? Oh, it needs a hug. Open. Poor thing. Continue, right? Oops. We have an open source license that expired on the 15th. But we got a new one. I just haven't updated yet. Okay. Poor IntelliJ gets so upset sometimes. Poor thing. Okay. There we are. There's this. Okay. Alt-Enter. Good. And this is Java, of course, so getters. I'm going to have a constructor, okay, great. Another constructor, and this one is for JPA, right? So why JPA? Why? Right? A toString method, there we go, good. And that's about it. That's a very basic entity, and I'll make it so by saying @entity. There we are. Okay, Alt-NT, okay. And I'm going to move this to a public type. I'll move this to a separate type because that could be public, that's fine. So I'll say public class, etc. And then I'm going to go back to my demo application, and I'll work with this from here. So what I want to be able to save, read, update, and delete records of type reservation from the database. So I'm going to create a repository. Now, a repository is a classic design pattern. It's an object that handles creation, reading, updating, and deleting, right? And so I'll say, interface reservation repository extends JPA repository. And a JPA repository comes from Spring Data, and it's an interface. It provides methods like find all given a certain sort, delete, save, flush, etc. Okay? And I don't have to implement these methods. They're done for me automatically by Spring Data. I can even provide custom finder methods here. I can say reservation find by reservation name string rn. Okay? Is this, by the way, big enough in the back? Should I make it bigger? A little bit bigger. My friends, I want this to work. How? Yeah. I never really got that thing to work. Oh yeah. Well, I'm going to be in the code editor. Hold on. We'll fix this. We've got this. 28? Haha. Yes? Okay. Thank you. Good. So now I've got a basic repository, and I'm going to do finder type things. This custom finder method, find by reservation name, will be automatically provided for us, and it'll turn into a method that looks like this: select all from reservations where reservation name equals rn. Okay, automatically. It's by convention. If I'm using MongoDB, then I'll get a BSON query. If I'm using Neo4j, I'll get a Cypher query. If I'm using Cassandra, I'll get a SQL query. If I'm using whatever, right? If I'm using the other kinds of repositories, I get the right kind of query. It's just done by convention here, okay? Of course, not all databases are the same. So Cassandra, for example, doesn't support paging, right? Makes sense. But where we can support the things that we can support, we do. And you get that for free, okay? Now, I'm going to use this bean. So I'm going to create an object. I have a couple of ways of creating an object. I can say component class my CLR implements command line runner. And I can do that. That's one thing, right? But think about what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to tell Spring that this is an object and that it has an interface, and this interface has one method, void run. Void run is going to be called when the Spring application starts up. So I want Spring to call the run method and to pass the public static void main arguments. That's all. It's a callback. Well, in modern languages, this would be a method reference or a lambda or a closure, right? An anonymous function. So only the modern languages like C and COBOL and Lisp and Smalltalk and Perl and PHP and Ruby and Haskell and OCaml and JavaScript and Forth and Ruby and, am I missing any more? Lisp, Scala, thank you, F#, C#, Visual Basic, what? Yes, that one, Kotlin, yeah, Kotlin, exactly. Only the modern languages from the last 50 years support this feature. So I'm very happy because Java 8 now also supports it, right? And so command line runners are, this is a perfect opportunity to use a Java 8 Lambda. So what I'm going to do is instead of creating a class and polluting the namespace with my bean, I'm going to register a bean definition of type command line runner, okay? This tells Spring that I want this method to be called, and I want the return value to be managed by Spring. But because it's now just an anonymous bean like that, I can return a new command line runner, and I can turn it into a Lambda, right? This doesn't have to be so painful. So I'll just do this. I'll say, there we are, right? Much cleaner. And I'm going to tell Spring to inject the repository for me. And there I'm going to say, array as list, and I'll say, Dmitry, Andrei, Oleg, what's the Black Widow's name? Natasha. Yep, there we are. What? Ivan? Like that? Cool. There. So I'm going to say, split it by the parentheses, and I'll say for each name, let's save it in the database, and I'll say new reservation name. There we go. And then I'm going to say rr.findAll, and then for each that comes back, I'll have a collection of reservation, a list of reservation. For each that comes back, let's say system.out.println. And of course, if you're looking at this, you're thinking, gee, that's a waste. I don't need to create a Lambda just to call the method and pass in the argument. I can just call a method reference. So I'll do that. Right? So that's much cleaner, and it removes the extra waste. And just to show you that I can do it, I'm going to also call by reservation name. So I'll say Dimitri. Okay, get that one record back, and I'll say like that. And then I'll run the code. Now, this is going to talk to the database that I have auto-configured for me. I have H2, right? If I did not have H2, H2 is an embedded in-memory database. If Spring Boot sees H2 or HSQL or Derby, and it does not see this, if it does not see a bean of type data source, right? If it does not see this, then it will create an embedded in-memory one for you. So I already have it on the class path, and it's going to create one for me, so I don't have to create my own. I'm going to run this now, and we're going to just see that I should have basic data in the database there. I'll drink some water. Okay, there we are. So there's my data. Right, look at that. Of course that worked. Of course that worked, right? This is a demo. There's no question. I don't know about you, but were you waiting there like, oh, is it going to work? Because I wasn't. I knew it was going to work. Instead, let's talk about this. This is actually what I wanted to show you. This is much more interesting. This is the ASCII artwork that comes with Spring Boot. And I love this ASCII artwork. I think it's very, very powerful. In the Java community, we have to learn to communicate better with the other communities out there. And ASCII artwork is how you communicate with them. It is the way that their vision works. If you're doing Node.js, this helps, right? It is a way of communicating with other people. So I love it. In the Spring team, we have doctors, PhDs, people that worked with nuclear physics in their previous lives, in their previous occupations. They decided that they wanted to make the world a better place, and so they joined the Spring team. Doctors, okay, very smart people. And it makes me very happy to imagine one day a GitHub issue saying, we need better ASCII artwork. And they delivered. Look at that. It's beautiful. Gorgeous, right? Look at that. Oh, right? I love this ASCII artwork. Now, you could get rid of it. You could change it, right? But that's a dumb idea. You're not going to be able to do a better job than that. Let's be honest. Let's just say that, okay? I love IntelliJ. I do. I'm a big fan. But I want to take issue. I just want to say that I have an objection to a new feature that they added that I think doesn't really need to be there, okay? What the hell? Why is that there? Can we get rid of this? Can we have a petition? Doesn't make any sense. Whatever, okay? So dumb feature, fine. So anyway, moving on. It is 2015, and of course, we're going to build a REST API next, right? So we've got data talking to the database. We've got creation, reading, updating, deleting. We didn't have to configure anything. Everything's just working. Let's go ahead and build a REST API, a simple one. So I'll go back to my build here, and I'll bring in Spring Boot Starter Web. Here we are. And I'll go back to my code. Hit auto import, thank you. And I'm going to build a simple REST API. I'll say at REST controller, class, reservation, REST controller, like so. And I'm going to inject my repository. Now, you should never, ever do what I am doing here, ever. Don't do as I'm doing. Do as I say. Use a constructor, okay? Like, I don't have a lot of space on my screen, my friends, and I'm also very lazy. But you should not do this. You should use a constructor. Every time you do this, where you have a field and you do injection, a unit test dies. It dies. Do you want to kill a unit test? No. They're innocent, okay? So save the unit tests. But I don't have a lot of space. You should use a constructor, of course. It's good object-oriented programming. So I'll say reservations, and I'm going to return all the reservations that are in my repository, okay? Very simple. I'll say reservation repository.find all, and I'll restart. And I'll drink some water while that's doing its thing. It takes more time to compile. Oh. Okay. Okay, localhost 8080/reservations. And there's our, I have a plugin, of course, so this is what it looks like if you view the source. But it's working, right? I have basic data coming back from the database. It's a REST API. Hooray, you know. But this is actually a lot of work, and I don't really think we need to do this, especially if you consider that we have a simpler way. Remember, this repository already knows how to do creation, reading, updating, and deleting. There's no need to write all that code again. And when you think about what REST is all about mapping HTTP verbs to creation, reading, updating, deleting, etc., right? So I'm going to use Spring Data REST. I'll bring that in here to automatically handle this for me, and I'm going to map it like so. Okay, and I'm going to say at REST resource path equals by name, and I'll even give this a parameter name. I'll say at rn param rn. Okay, and now I'm going to restart. Okay, take some more water. I have a cold, my friends. I'm sorry. Elevator music. So there's my old API, and now let's refresh. This is the new one. This has slightly more in the relationships here. What we have are links, metadata. Okay? These metadata help us understand what we can do with the resource. This is an implementation of the design pattern, HotOS, hypermedia, hypertext as the engine, or hypermedia as the engine of application state. We see this all of the time in our daily usage of the web. Whenever you go to a page that has a style sheet, the style sheet says link rel equals text CSS, source equals x.css, like that, right? This tells the browser that this document is important because it's a style sheet. The relevance is the text CSS. That tells the client that if it wants to stylize the HTML, it needs to follow this metadata to this other document. That's what we have here. This link says if I want to find more about this one record, I go here, right? And if I want to go to if I want to add custom links, maybe I have another relationship or whatever, those links also come here. It's a game, it's a menu, right? I can start from localhost / even, and I can get a menu. It says, oh, you're at /, right? Well, what can you do? I can go to reservations. Great, so I'm going to go to reservations. And it says that you have certain parameters. So I'll say page equals 1 and size equals 1. And you can see there's the one record, and then links, more links. The first record, previous one, the current one, the next, and the last, right? All of this metadata is automatically added for you about the relationships in the system. Even better, I can go to reservations / search, and I can see that, oh, look, there's search endpoints, search by name, and it takes a parameter. So I'll say rn, there we are, and I can do a search for my friend Dimitri, right? So there's one record coming back from the search, right? So all of this you get for free by that repository, which is great. It makes it very easy to build APIs and to build them quickly. And if you're trying to do a web application, you can just stand up a web API, talk to that, and maybe you're done, you know? But of course, this is actually, you know, we should have a web application just for fun. So I'm going to go ahead and build a regular old MVC controller. We're going to say at controller class reservation MVC controller. And again, terrible thing, I'm going to inject the repository like that. I'll say at request mapping reservations. And again, this is a demo, my friends. It's a demonstration. I'm just to make this clear that this is a demonstration and that you should never, ever, ever do something like this. Exactly. I'm going to go ahead and do something crazy like reservations.php. Okay, so that'll be, there we go. There you go. There we are. There we go. Now, it's a simple page, and what's going to happen is when Spring MVC sees a request for reservations.php, it's going to call this method, and it's going to give me a model attribute, and the model is just a map. It has keys and values, basically. So I say model add attribute reservations, and I'm going to say this.reservation repository.find all. Okay? Now, when this method concludes, it's going to return a string, and that string tells Spring Boot, Spring MVC, what template to render. So it needs to find the template somehow. And there's an algorithm, an object called a view resolver. that's in place by default. The view resolver that we're going to use will look for templates in source main resources, templates, plus x plus .html. So x is reservations. It'll look for source main resources, templates, reservations.html. Okay. We're going to use timeleaf for our templating. You have many options. You can use velocity. You can use FreeMarker. You can use Groovy server pages. You can use Mustache. You can use all sorts of things. You could even use JSP, but don't use JSP. Please, just, I'm here for you. It's for you. I don't care. Have you ever gone into the office after a nice walk to the office? You have your coffee. You're excited. People are happy. The birds are singing. And then you go to the office and there's the graphics designer people and they're looking at you like, right? Have you ever had that? Or have you ever come home after a long day and then you open your door and there's a bag of poop on fire? On fire, right? That's the graphics designers telling you not to use JSP. They don't like that at all. They can't do anything with it. It means, to them, it's like saying, I hate you, signed you, right? Don't do that. So you have choices in this world. JSP is one of them. Don't make that choice. I'm here for you. I'm just trying to help. So here we go. I'm going to bring in timeleaf. I'm not going to go ahead and write a timeleaf template live here. I don't have much time. So we'll go to github.com. Microservices. I'm cheating a little bit here. Okay. T, reservation. Sure. Okay, great. Paste. Here we go. I'm going to say reservation. Reservations.html. Okay, so like that. Paste. And there's my simple template. And it's just a very simple template. It's previewable. You can open it up in your browser, which is why graphics designer people will love it, right? So it says for each R in the reservations model attribute, here's the ID and the reservation name. This is just for preview. It's not going to be rendered out, actually, right? It's just for design preview. Everything else is pretty boring, right? And that should be it. That's a very simple page. I am not a designer, so we'll leave that as there. Another option, of course, is in modern applications, you may not even have server-side processed HTML. You might just have HTML or assets that get sent directly to the client, and then it's all just JavaScript and REST. And that's fine, too. Put that in here. You can say file new hi.html, and I'll say h1 hi Joker. Right? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to load both of those, and we'll run the application again, and I'll drink some water. It's going to be amazing. I love water. Oh, what does that say? Cool. Blessed. Okay, so this is there, of course, right? That's that. Now reservations.php. There's my simple page, my data from the database. That's fine, right? I'm going to go to, oops, too far. I'm going to go to hi.html. And again, it could be JavaScript. It could be whatever, right? That's just sent back. These are kind of conventional, common ways of building server-side views. Another way that might be nice is have you ever heard of GWT or GWT, this? Google Web Toolkit. It's kind of nice if you're trying to build data-driven applications and you don't want to really worry too much about it looks good enough, you know. It's not, if you're trying to build a web application that is on the front end and you want to change how everything looks, maybe don't use this because you're gonna have to master JavaScript. But if you're trying to throw something together very quickly, GWT or something like Vaadin, which builds on top of GWT, can be very, very efficient and expressive. So the Vaadin project have a Spring Boot auto configuration. So here I'll say at Spring, I'm going to go back to my build first. I'll say pom.xml. I'm going to bring in the Spring Boot starter from their project. This is not a Spring, dependency. And I'll say Spring UI. Okay. Alt enter, and I'll say path equals UI. Sure. I'll say at theme. Hello, class. I'll say reservation UI extends UI. Alt enter, init. Same as before. I'm going to say at AutoWired private reservation repository. And I'm going to build a simple UI out of Java code, right? It's going to be compiled into JavaScript, but I don't need to worry about that. So I'll say table, Alt-Enter, on table, and I'll say set container data source, new bean item container of type reservation. So I'm drawing a table of type reservation that gets its data from the reservation repository, same as before. And I'm going to set that as the content for my grid, my component. I'm going to make it a full-sized UI, and then that's it, okay? So I'll run this again, restart, drink more water. It's important to keep hydrated when you're up here. These lights are formidable. Oh, it's done already, God. Okay, sorry. Back. Okay, so here we are, UI. So this is /UI, right? And now I have this simple table using compiled JavaScript. And if you look at the code, you know, there's no HTML. It's all just JavaScript, right? And it's all, I don't know how it works. It's magic. But the point is it works, right? So there's that, right? Now I've got server-side components. I've got a basic web app. I've got a REST API that is very, very rich and expressive and has hypermedia. I've got regular MVC controller UI that supports all sorts of different types of views. And I've got static resources being sent back to the client, unchanged, that I could use to build my Angular app or whatever, right? All very good. But this isn't the reason that, you know, you should be using Spring Boot. I think it's a good reason, but it's not the big one. It's not the one that I care about. Because remember, building an application and getting it working, you know, this is not the first time that this has been possible, right? It's much easier, sure, of course. But what we care about is helping people get applications to production, delivering business value to users and to customers quickly. So of course, we got the application up and running. We should build a test, of course, right? So I'll go do that actually quickly. Testing is very important. I don't normally build the test, but people earlier said they weren't testing. There's like a few people that didn't raise their hand, and that makes me feel like, makes me want to drink bleach, you know? You should always test. So I'm going to go ahead and write a quick unit test that'll test our REST API. I'll say private mock MVC builder, proc web application context. Okay, and I'm going to say at before public void setup throws exception, and I'll say mock MVC builder dot web application context this dot web application dot build, and I'll say private mock MVC. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the mock MVC API, which Spring provides, Spring MVC, to write tests against my REST API that I built, because I don't want to have to install or run my server every time I want to test my REST API, but I need to test my REST API, right? This is the contract for other services, so it's very important to be able to quickly run tests on that. So of course you can do mock testing, but for pseudo integration, half integration, this is very, very convenient. So I can say mock MVC.perform, mock MVC request builders.get. I'm going to say reservations. So I'm making a HTTP request to the /reservations endpoint using HTTP GET, and I'm telling it that I'm expecting a media type, not of JSON. Okay, so remember, we're going to see what we're going to see, but the endpoint that we have returns a different media type. Okay, and I'm going to expect that we have a successful status. Yeah, actually, I'll leave that there. We'll say that we want a content status of OK, and we'll say that we want the content to be media type dot parse media type, and this is going to be not quite right, but it'll be close. Application HAL JSON, okay, and return. Okay, so I'm building a simple REST API test, and I'm using these static methods, and of course I can make them static imports. This is going to fail the first time, and the reason is because we need to get the content type that's coming from the REST endpoint. So I'm going to go here and I'll say bring this localhost reservations, and I'm going to make an HTTP GET, and the content type that we got back was application HAL charset blah blah blah. Okay, so application HAL JSON with the charset equals UTF minus 8, and that should work. Let's see if it does. Kill this, run this. Come on. So this is not actually starting up the whole web container. Oh, sad. Oh, I actually got, oh, what did I say? Thank you. Except, there. Wow. Should work, right? We're doing this live. Yay, good. So now we have a basic web API. Now we can be a little bit more confident that one part of it at least is working. It's very easy to write these tests, and it doesn't take a lot of time to run because it's not actually starting up Tomcat. It's starting up Spring MVC and routing the requests through the engine, making the validations. So it's very, very quick. Now, once I have tests and I have confidence in my test, I've already built an application, I've now written tests. I want to be able to deploy this to production. But there's a lot of things that you have to do before you can go to production, right? First of all, I want to be able to see how the application is doing, right? Again, you can't fix what you can't measure. So being able to understand what it's doing is very important. These are part of the non-functional requirements that slow people down when they're trying to move applications to production. How many of you have ever read Michael Nygaard's amazing book, Release It? Release It? This one right here? Really? Oops, nope, I can't spell. There. Anybody? A great book. The important thing to remember is code complete is not the same as production ready. So even though you may have finished your features, it's not ready to go to production. And oftentimes, we leave until the last minute. We leave these important things that you must do. So being able to measure how your application is doing is one of those things that's very important. It's also important to be able to move your application quickly, to deploy it, to manage it, to stop it, to start it, etc., right? So I'm going to go ahead and bring back the actuator here. And the actuator is a framework that is part of Spring Boot that simply exposes information about the state of your application. Things that are important that you're going to want to have, but that nobody likes to write. Nobody gets excited about these things. Nobody goes home and ignores their children to write these, right? This is boring code, but it's important code. It's stuff that every application will probably have. I'm sure you'll see some of these things yourself. So let's see, demo application, run. Okay, localhost 8080/reservations. There's my REST API, great. So I'm making requests to my REST API. I'm making requests to my Vaadin endpoint. I'm making requests to my reservations.php page, right? And I'm making lots of requests. I'm Command R. I'm making as many requests as I can. I'm not even letting go. So I'm just causing traffic. And now once that's there, it's still going, I can't even stop it. Oh, there we go. Once that's there, I can go to, for example, metrics. Metrics tells me information about the application itself. It says that I have this much memory free, these many processors, this much uptime, etc. And it says that I have made 75 requests to reservations.php, and I had a status code of 200 for those requests, right? It says that I made 13 requests to reservations. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, wrong one. This one. I made 8 requests to reservations, and I had a status code of 200, etc. If I want to see deeper details, I can go to trace, okay? And trace will show me a request log, the timestamp, the HTTP verb, the endpoint, the request parameters, and so on, into the application. Lots of applicant, right? It keeps the last 100 elements, so 100 elements in memory. But you can change that, or you can write it to disk or whatever. But by default, you have that. If I want to see which HTTP endpoints are available to production, right, available to traffic, I go to mappings. And this says that, for example, the fave icon, if I request a fave icon, I wonder what happens actually. Fave icon.ico. There's an icon. Oh, whatever. So anyway, you can provide your own, I guess, but so that's handled by this bean. It says that if I go to reservations.php, it's going to call com.example.reservation.mvc-controller.page and pass in a model. So I can see which beans are handling what. I can see the content type that is produced if I specify it. I can see the types of verbs, HTTP verbs that are supported, etc. If I go to, what's another good one? If I go to beans, /beans, this tells me all of the objects that are in my Spring Boot application and how they are combined together to build the final application. Right? So it says that my reservation UI lives in this Java class here, and it has this dependency, and it's in this code here. So I can see the graph of objects as they're wired together. If I go to info has nothing. It has the hypermedia link, but nothing else. This is a good place if you're doing continuous delivery or continuous deployment to put things like the git commit ID, the artifact ID, the version, the group. Put the information about the service itself there. This is good so that if you do a git commit and the code goes all the way through the tests and then it gets deployed, now you can see, oh, this is the git commit that triggered it, and I can understand what happened and what changed. Another endpoint that's very convenient is health, right? Health tells me the health of my application, and this is very important, right? How many of you have written a health endpoint for a service at some point? Yeah, it's something we all do. It's not fun. There's no passion. Nobody loves doing this. Your boss will never. He or she will never come to you and say, "Good job, you have written an amazing health check. Here's a promotion," right? Of course not, right? It's boring. You need it, but it's got to be done, and nobody wants to do it. So we can tell automatically some things about your system. We can tell, for example, that your disk space, it looks like this. We can tell that you're connected to a database, H2, and that it is up, and that there's a validation query, select one from dual, or select one, right? Select one from dual, that kind of thing, right? It's a validation query that confirms the connection pool is working. That's all here, good. But I want to be able to change that, and we can do that now. I also want to move these endpoints to be under another URL so I can secure them, right? So that's all very easy to do. So we're going to go back to our application here, and we're going to open up application.properties, and I'm going to say management.contextPath equals /admin, okay? I'm going to even say management.port equals 9,000, and I'll say server.port equals 8,000. So the management, the health, the metrics, all that stuff will be on a different port than my regular web application. I'm also going to go ahead and bring in a few other nice things to have. So I'm going to bring in the Spring Data REST HAL browser and the Spring Boot Starter remote shell. Okay? And once I have done this, I want to make one more change. I want to customize my health check. I want to make my own change to the health indicator. So I'm going to say Joker health indicator. So I'm going to add my own. Of course, what I have is good, right? It's good enough. But, and Spring Boot can provide a lot of defaults. It has a Java Mail, JMS, disk space, data source, MongoDB, RabbitMQ, Redis, Solr, Elasticsearch, etc. But I want to provide my own. So I'll say new health indicator. And I'm going to say return health.status, heart, Joker, right? Okay. And of course, this is, it's a very simple contract. When the endpoint is called, this bean will be asked to return its health. So I've made all these changes now. I'm going to restart my application and drink some water. I love water. Oh. All of this information is information that I want to be able to view in many different ways, right? So I've got this here. Of course, this will no longer work, right? 8,000. It's changed. So it's 9,000 /admin, /admin, /health. There's that. The regular application is at 3,000 or 8,000 /reservations. And even better, I've added the I've added other ways to view the information. Remember also we changed the health indicator. So I'm going to go here to 9000/admin/health. And you can see that my custom health indicator is now there as well. But these are all through REST. It's nice if I can get this information other ways, Maybe I don't want REST. So by default, this information is also available using JMX. I can go to JConsole, for example. Do any of you use JMX? Yeah, it's still popular. It's an option. So I'm going to launch my JMX client, or JMC if you like. Endpoint. And you can see all of those endpoints are here as well. So there you go. Health endpoint. I'm going to open the operations, get the data, and there you go. It says Joker status equals I love Joker, right? So there's my custom status. Another option that I like a lot is the remote shell. And the remote shell is automatically going to give us a username and password if we do not use Spring Security. So Spring Security can talk to LDAP or PAM or Kerberos or OAuth or Active Directory or whatever you want. But if you don't use it, if you don't configure it, it gives you a default password, which is this one, and a user called user. So I'm going to say SSH-P 2000 user at 127.0.0.1, enter, paste. First thing you notice, good quality ASCII artwork. Now, it takes a lot of work to get this right, and we did, right? So look at that. Good, very, very good. If you're in a production situation, if you're nervous and something is wrong in the system, this is very calming. Very calming. Okay, so now I have options. I can say help, please. Okay. Oops, too big. I can say metrics. Metrics. There's the metrics. It's changing without me touching the keyboard. The numbers are live, right? I can say endpoint, invoke health endpoint. Okay. So you can see, oops, there's that. My custom Joker endpoint is there as well. My favorite view, of course, is dashboard. So dashboard shows you the threads plus the memory, right? So you've got your different memory pools all there available and visible inside the application. So we're trying to make this available as easily as possible. Of course, you can also export to systems like OpenTSDB or StatsD or Graphite for the metrics and so on. We want you to be able to view and understand everything that's happening as easily as possible. Once you've got all that plugged in, it's very important to be able to run this application cleanly. So we also support easy deployment. This is a jar. Remember what I said earlier, it's a jar. There's a new feature in Spring Boot 1.5 that I'll use here called executable jars, okay? So I'll show you this now. I'm going to go to the command line. This is inside of my demo directory, inside of downloads, okay? CD, downloads, demo. Come on. CD, I'm going to do maven, clean, install. Do we have time? Oh, we've got 3 minutes. That's plenty of time. Whew, I was worried. Yeah, we could write a book. So, CD target. I have a fat jar, like me. So there's that, 58 megs. That contains everything. It includes the web server, includes the SSH shell, the server. It includes JMX support. It includes all of Hibernate. It includes the Spring jars. It includes everything, right? And I can do this, of course, right? I can run it like that. I can even override some of the properties that I saw earlier. So remember I said server.port equals 8000? I can say server.port equals 8010, and then do java-jar demo jar. And that'll override the default configuration property that you see in the property file, right? This is one way to go, sure. So you see now it says it's on port 8010. I could also do environment variables. I could say export server_port equals 8020, right? And that gets automatically done for me. And I could do this again. This is one way to go. But I still have to manage this Java process, right? I have to start and stop it and make sure that there's not 2 instances of it running and all that. And this becomes a little annoying. And whenever you deploy to production, if you're not using a cloud like Cloud Foundry or something like that, then you still have a lot of work to do. You have to manage that process. So we've implemented a feature, these executable jars inside of Spring Boot 1.3. Let me ask you a question. How many of you know how a jar is read by Java, by the JVM? You know, an operating system reads a file from the top down, right? Did you know that the JVM reads jars from the bottom up? So this gives us an opportunity for some evil things. So I'm going to do this instead, right? And what that's doing is, well, it's a little bit amazing. So it's a shell script, 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 bytecode, right? So it reads and writes itself, and it even has the start, the stop, restart status commands. So if you put this in your init directory or systemd, that both of them automatically work with this. You just take the jar, deploy it, and you're done, right? So that's, these are some of the features that we hope will make it easier for you to get an application up and running. And of course, remember I changed the environment variable to 80/20, so now it's on 80/20. So that's, I think, we've got one more minute. Do you want one more minute? Yeah? No? Should I just get off? Okay. I wanted to show you I want you guys to understand, guys and gals, of course. I want you to understand that this isn't magic. You can do the same thing for your own code. So we have in the meta-inf directory of the jars, we have a little text file here called spring.factories. And the spring.factories text file has org spring framework boot autoconfig enable autoconfig equals, and then we have these Java configuration classes. You can see, for example, in the rabbit autoconfig, .java, it's just a regular Java configuration class like this, and it provides definitions of beans like our command line runner and our health indicator. These beans have annotations, conditional annotations, that tell Spring whether to create the object or not. So for example, in this case, I don't want to create any of these RabbitMQ Java beans if the Rabbit template class is not on the class path. That's what this is. It says, if the class is here, then evaluate the class. Otherwise, don't bother. Same here. I have a Rabbit template, and I'm returning the object, but I don't want to create it if this bean is not already provided by if it's already provided by the user. Spring Boot uses this to make it so that if you define your own object or you override it, it'll use what you provide. Otherwise, it'll try to provide sensible defaults. You can do the same thing. So if you are building new services and you want to be able to stand up a new service quickly, you can create an autoconfig for your organization. Maybe it has security and auditing and all these things that you have to have across all of your services. Put that in a jar, put it in spring.factories in the meta-inf directory, and then every new service just has that jar. It'll automatically start up with that. So there you go. What did you guys think? Okay? You like it? Okay, right on. I want to say thank you so much. Spasiba, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.